Hi, this is Scott Wilkinson, host of Home Theater Geeks. In episode 330, I chat with John Bishop, a personal cinema architect, about his approach to designing home theaters. So stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Home Theater Geeks is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson, recorded November 17th, 2016. Episode 330, The Personal Cinema Architect. This episode of Home Theater Geeks is brought to you by Epson's new EcoTank printers. With Epson's line of SuperTank all-in-one printers, you can print thousands of documents without running out of ink. EcoTank is loaded and ready to print when you are. Visit epson.com/ecotank to find out more. And by Optical Cables by Corning. Corning's incredibly durable Thunderbolt and USB 3-point optical cables are longer, thinner, lighter, and stronger. Go to opticalcablesbycorning.com to learn more. And by CuriosityStream, a subscription streaming service that offers over 1,500 documentaries and non-fiction series from the world's best filmmakers. Get unlimited access starting at just $2.99 a month. And for our audience, the first 2 months are completely free if you sign up at curiositystream.com/twit and use the offer code TWIT. Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, the home theater geek and editor of avsforum.com. This week's guest geek is John Bishop, a home theater designer and founder of the American Society of Personal Cinema Architects. Hey, John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Scott. It's great to be here.
Really happy to have you here. Those of you who are watching the show live at live.twit.tv can join the chat room there or at irc.twit.tv. And you can post questions as we go, and I'll pass along as many as I can. It always helps if you put my screen name in somewhere in the message, which is my name, Scott Wilkinson, no dots or dashes or spaces or anything like that, because then it shows up in a different color on my screen. So, John, we've been friends for actually quite some time now, ever since the old Runco trips to Mexico.
Cabo is definitely, you make friends and bond in Cabo.
You do, and we did. And so I've been thinking for a long time I wanted to get you on the show, and I'm really happy to finally have you here because we got a lot to talk about.
Sure.
I want to start by having you tell us a little bit about what you do, and specifically about this term, personal cinema architect.
Oh, well, the genesis of that term goes back to Cabo. In fact, many years ago, I gave a little presentation on the topic, and you were there because Sam had me do it for the press separately, and then for the reps, and then for all the attendees. And the genesis is when we moved from CRT to digital and TV formats to CinemaScope, the widescreen cinema format, we were learning a lot of new things. One of which was the size of the screen, the format of the screen, how bright should the screen be, and we had a lot of projectors to sell too. At one time, we had iterations of something like 80 different projector SKUs when you lamped them up differently and different lens configurations and so forth.
And this was all with Runco, right?
All with Runco, and it paralleled developments with Stewart Film Screen. You know, CineWide and CineCurve were developed jointly by Don Stewart and Sam Runco and Dennis Erskine, because in 2002, the initial home theater cruise, I was in a stateroom where Sam was throwing a party, and Don and Sam and Dennis and I were chit-chatting about widescreen cinema. Now, why can't we do that now that we're not dealing with CRTs? And what came of that was I think the widescreen revolution for home, much like in '53, the widescreen revolution hit commercial cinema. So I developed a software program that would allow you to pick a right projector for a right screen size and hit the right light levels for a given viewing environment. A dedicated theater that's a dark room, a living room, which is, you need to double the brightness at least 2 to 4 times, or a bright room, a very bright high ambient light room. And I created this software package where you would enter your screen size and it would filter out all the projectors that didn't have the horsepower to do it properly. And I called that program, Mark Stein helped me coin the phrase, the personal cinema architect. And from that, I got connected to sort of the top dealers around the country via my vendors, guys like Stewart and Runco and James Loudspeaker and people in different areas of the universe of cinema products. And then connected with my local dealers here. I have a rep firm and cover New England as a technical rep for them. And that term, personal cinema architect, and then the American Society of Personal Cinema Architects became our secret society. And really all it was is us doing things a little bit differently. And you'll see that, I think, evolve into a conversation that Theo Kalamarakis and his initiative is moving towards, that I'm also connected to. So it comes from those early days, and it's cinema-centric. Everything I do from that point onward, I'd say 2002, I got connected more to cinema and what's important in their world and how to translate to residential, a little differently than the way I'd been thinking up until that point.
And you're talking about cinema as opposed to television.
Absolutely. Yeah. What is the experience when you go to the Samuel Goldwyn Academy Theater and sit in row 6 or 9 or 12 or 18? And if those are ideal experiences based on a view that you choose when you pick the row, what is it that makes those unique relative to what we're used to in a living room on a television? And that's not just viewing geometry, but it is first and foremost viewing geometry, in my opinion. That's the biggest differentiator between real cinema, a genuine cinema experience, and the corporal, seeing it with other people, and what happens in a living room with a big TV.
So what do you mean? What are the characteristics of this viewing geometry that make it, that are important to consider and that are different than watching TV in a living room?
In the simplest terms, it's a larger view. And so in other words, the screen takes up more of your field of view. It does indeed, yeah. So television had been, how far do you sit from a TV? Standard definition was 9 screen heights. And the technical people in TV and the technical people in cinema always view the world in terms of screen heights. That's the metric. In cinema.
And isn't it weird that TVs are almost always sold in terms of screen diagonal? I always find this to be really unfortunate because we really want to talk about screen heights when we're talking about viewing geometry. But when you buy a TV, it's in diagonal. When you buy a widescreen projection screen, it might very often be specified by the width, not by the height. I am with you. I find it quite annoying. And in the cinema world, they don't do that. And there's a secondary aspect to that, and it is the aspect ratio. The cinema experience has been defined from the days of magic lanterns in terms of how big is that screen's height relative to where you're sitting. And the standards have been basically in the area of 1.5 to 3 screen heights for typical movie houses. And the large palaces would have lots of seats further back. But the prime seats are always considered to be about 1.5 to 3 screen heights. Well, in television, in video, when we went to HD, they said now you can sit as close as 3 screen heights or further back. And so that's basically the last row of a commercial cinema, 3 screen heights. Oh, so why would you choose without any other option a last row experience when it comes to cinema? Yeah, you wouldn't. And that led me to defining the size a little bit differently. And people a lot smarter than me, people in the digital cinema world who've written textbooks and who have commented as manufacturers, have said the reason television is looking at things that way has nothing to do with what's going on in cinema. eye charts and 60
degrees, arc minutes per degree, and limits of resolution are fine if you're looking at black text on a white background in 40 or 50 foot lamberts of ambient light. But that's not cinema. Cinema is moving images in a dark space, and you do not see pixel structure. You do not see artifacts until you get closer than about 1.5 screen heights, and that's for 2K.
And that's for
that
2K.
Was true for, that's 2K. And 35 millimeter film, basically 2K was designed and specified to meet or exceed the performance of 35 millimeter film. So 2K is better than any film house ever was.
I've heard, though, that 35 millimeter film, one way to specify the ultimate resolution of 35 millimeter film is sort of the grain size, right? Film consists of a bunch of particles or grains in an emulsion that on a plastic strip. And I've heard that if you look at it in that way, you could say the 35 millimeter film has a resolution of like 6K.
Well, if you're looking at a slide projector, you could look at film in that way. Joel Silver, on one Cabo trip that you probably heard his presentation on, talked about a study. It's the first that it came to my attention, that was done by SIMPTE, and I think it was multi-organizational, that surveyed 6 theaters around the world. There was a Paris, there was a Hollywood, there was an Italy, there were reference cinemas in 6 locations around the world. And they simply shot test patterns, resolution test patterns, and went through the 35 millimeter film creation process, state of the art, with first print releases shown in these theaters. And they sat engineers in the room and they measured and observed the resolution of 35 millimeter film. And it basically came down to about 720p.
Really?
And it was dependent on the location on the screen. There were areas of the screen, depending on the house, where it was down to about 480, and there were areas where it was a little higher than 720. And all of that comes into play because the film is in motion and it's a mechanical system, and those fine lines of resolution get blurred. And so what we've been seeing in 35 millimeter films terms has really been about 720p digital, which is why 2K meets the spec as being at or above 35 millimeter film. And it is, because it's in motion and it's steady and that pixel resolution is there. And that's why you don't get complaints about digital cinemas these days, 2K or 4K.
I mean, original digital cinema was 1K, right? The very first digital cinema projectors, I think, were
true, but DCI has a standard, and that created the 2K as the minimum. There was e-cinema, where we were just playing with electronic cinema, and yes, all kinds of things were done, and that's part of what we were selling in the early days of digital projectors for home. The Runco products came from the e-cinema world at the very high end.
Emily the Strange in the chat room is asking, I wonder if there are any statistics or research about where people choose to sit at certain seating locations in theaters and their viewing experience compared to those who choose to sit somewhere else.
I haven't found anything real specific to cinema, but there are a lot of studies that have to do with viewing preferences and viewing geometries. And a lot of it has to do with just sort of ergonomics and human response to stimulus and so forth. And actually, I had a nice conversation with Keith Yates, maybe about almost a year ago now. He was out in Connecticut at my dealer Realm, who's the dealer that has the extra large theater in the images coming up. He has a 18-foot director's choice with a DCI projector on it. And we were chatting about viewing geometry because in that room, he's got a seat that's 1 screen height back.
Which would normally be considered too close.
Yeah, that's a pretty dramatic thing. It's not considered too close in the IMAX parlance, that's for sure. But in sort of usual cinema parlance, it's a little too close. It's like row 1 of the Academy Theater. Row 1 or 2 is 1 screen height back. And that gets a little imposing. But that's in 185, and he's got a 185 screen. So Scope puts that first row at about 1.5 screen heights, which looks awesome. But Keith brought some studies to my attention that were more of the human ergonomic studies about not only elevation of your head, but the vertical viewing geometry that you find pleasant, and beyond that you find unpleasant. And he was saying numbers in the range of 30 to 35 degrees vertical. 1.5 screen heights is 30 degrees vertical.
Well, there you go.
I have kind of come to that conclusion based on observation of cinemas and personal experience, just building them and liking them or not liking them in homes. And but he brought some technical studies to my attention. And by the way, the next day, I visited the Hahn Theater that you showed last week when Don Stewart was on, and saw that 19-foot director's choice theater, and that is a state-of-the-art theater. That was a real fun place to visit, and the owner gave us the demo, and I don't think I've ever heard a more passionate guy present his theater than he did. He's a retired cinematographer, so no shock there.
Yeah, I featured that theater as Home Theater of the Month on AVS Forum not too long ago, and I agree. It's a phenomenal theater. It's just like that's unbelievable.
That's home theater of the decade, I would say.
I would agree. Yeah, and
the Realm Theater is basically the same, almost the same type of theater. The screen size, the viewing geometry is very similar. A little bit larger than Mr. Hahn's, but in the same category.
You mentioned one screen height is sitting one screen height back is about right for IMAX, and that makes sense to me because the native IMAX aspect ratio is not widescreen. It's more like, as I recall, on the order of 2 to 1.
The film, I think, was 1.45 to 1. The 70 millimeter film. If you're talking about those theaters,
the IMAX film, yeah.
And IMAX calls that a large aspect ratio. I call that the small aspect ratio. But they're doing it because it's a gigantic square in front of you. So it takes up your full field of vision, horizontal, and it doesn't matter what the aspect ratio is if you're sitting less than one screen height from the image.
Right.
You're not seeing the edges.
That's another problem or thing to think about with regard to where you're sitting, how close you're sitting. Somebody on AVS Forum mentioned this to me was, well, yeah, you can calculate how close you need to be based on visual acuity, and even that's not actually accurate, as you pointed out, what Joel Silver said. But also, if you're too close, especially to a widescreen movie, you can't take in the entire image all at once. You have to kind of turn your head right and left to see what's going on the sides. And that would seem to me to be too close.
No, I don't think so.
You don't disagree? You disagree? Okay.
Well, Lowell Thomas and I would disagree, because when Lowell Thomas introduced Cinerama and said, ladies and gentlemen, this is Cinerama, what they were looking at before he said those words was a giant 4:3 image. You know, the usual 30-foot, 35-foot high image. That's what people were used to. And that height did not change. But it went from, so if it's a 30-degree vertical field of view, a 1.33 to 1 image is only another third larger. So what is that? 42 degrees, something like that. Mm-hmm. But when you go to CinemaScope, you go to Cinerama, you're multiplying 3 times the vertical angle. So Cinerama was a 90-degree horizontal field of view minimum. And if you were sitting closer,
more
Fred
than
Waller
that.
Said 145 degrees was where your peripheral vision, his famous story is he put toothpicks in his wide brim hat and he kept moving them out until he couldn't detect the location of the toothpicks. That's how he determined the peripheral vision of human vision. And they want you to turn your head. And believe me, great directors want you to turn your head. They're always messing around with the shiny thing over here. I'm not doing this well because of the camera, right? The shiny thing is over here, and all of a sudden, something sneaks up from the opposite side of the screen. They want to shock you, and they want to create an emotional response. So turning your head's not a bad thing. Not being able to see the edge after you've turned your head, which is what can happen if you're sitting in an IMAX, especially a science theater, those gigantic, Omnimax theaters even. Right. That was a different purpose. They were trying to put you out in the universe. So no matter where you turn, that was sort of the virtual reality in a large format.
Yeah. Not a personal virtual reality.
Right.
Well, listen, we got a lot more to talk about, but before we do, I've got fact, I got several sponsors to thank for this episode, and one of them is Epson. Epson's revolutionary cartridge-free EcoTank line of printers for home and office introduce a new age in printing. The EcoTank ET4550 wireless all-in-one printer doesn't use ink cartridges. Instead, it features an amazing, innovative, refillable ink tank, earning it the title of CES 2016 Innovation Awards honoree. So there's no more out-of-ink frustration. It includes up to 2 years of ink, equal to about 11,000 black pages or 8,500 color pages. You can save up to 80% on ink with low-cost replacement ink bottles. Now, it's powered by Precision Core printing technology. It has auto two-sided printing and a 30-page auto document feeder, and easy wireless printing from tablets and smartphones. All EcoTank printers deliver an unbeatable combination of convenience and value. With Epson's EcoTank line of printers, you'll have the freedom to print without running out of ink. In fact, the Epson EcoTank system was named the 2016 Small Biz Windows Printer of the Year. So visit epson.com/ecotank today to transform the way your home, office, or work group prints. For the best combination of ease and value, turn to the Epson EcoTank printers. That's epson.com/ecotank. And we thank Epson very much for their support of Home Theater Geeks. Epson, exceed your vision. So, John Bishop, personal cinema architect, we're talking about just exactly that. And I wanted to talk to you also, we've been talking some about aspect ratios. And that is a very important thing in the home cinema, also in commercial cinema, especially since movies are not made in one aspect ratio. They come in a variety, don't they?
Oh, they sure do. And, that does lead to the conversation we had before the show and a couple of documents I sent you.
Mm-hmm.
I did one project where we set up 11 unique aspect ratios and did it in such a way that it was pixel mapped on the screen. So as perfectly as it could be translated from the disc, Blu-ray, to the screen is what we did. And the screen's native width was 255:1. So that matched the first decade of CinemaScope. And that was as wide as we could do for the room. And it's hard to justify a lot wider than that because you run out of content. There's
a little
Ultra-Panavision.
bit.
There's a little bit. Ultra-Panavision is 2 or 3 dozen movies that you can watch. And we talked about the Quentin Tarantino Hateful Eight, which is the modern production in Ultra-Panavision because of the passion that Tarantino has for film and what happened in those days of road shows and exciting large scale imagery,
which he just did. So, he did with Hateful Eight. He actually did what he called a road show, in which he installed, or somebody installed, these 70 millimeter projectors in certain theaters around the country, and people could go see it. Now, what was the aspect ratio of that movie?
276:1 is Ultra-Panavision. And actually on that movie's Blu-ray, there's a wonderful little extra where they talk about the process and finding these lenses and Panavision's excitement to bring these out of the dust and see if they're still in pristine shape and suitable for shooting a movie, which they were. And they showed us what the cinema experience was like 2, 3, 4, and 5 decades ago when people dressed up to go out to the movies, and it was a special thing. It was as special as a sporting event might be today, and it came through with the road show of the Hateful Eight, and I think he ran it for 2 weeks before
Something
Christmas,
like that, yeah,
without distributing it into any digital cinemas. So if you were going to see it in the first release days of that movie, it was in a 70 millimeter theater by his design, and I took the opportunity to do that, and it was a spectacular experience.
I have to say, I really was tempted to go see it, but as I told you off air, I really don't like violent movies, and of course, Quentin Tarantino, you can pretty much guarantee it's going to be a violent movie. I did hear later that about the first half of it wasn't so bad, and then the second half it got really bad. So I could have watched the first half and left. I wish I had done that.
Yeah, it's cartoon violence. You definitely have to tune that out. But look at Chinatown has a lot of violence. I hate that nose scene, but I understand why it's in there for the art.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned some of the documents that you sent, and this may be a time to show one of them. Where is that one that has the 11 different aspect ratios? Is that the GHE?
GHE project, yeah. I called that an audiophile project because it was a legacy theater that was installed in 16 years ago with a 9-inch gun CRT, a Dunleavy room with state-of-the-art electronics driving it and all that good stuff circa the year 2000.
Right.
And we upgraded him. I think that's about a year and a half ago now. Alan Goodwin and I worked on it. It's Goodwin's high-ends customer. And it was a real interesting exercise at how to handle all the aspect ratios. And Alan is a real cinephile himself. So we had aspect ratios formatted for 1.2 to 1 aspect ratio early cinema films, the early, like City Lights, Charlie Chaplin, and so forth. There are a handful of films that are released now in that 1.19 or 1.2 to 1 aspect ratio. It's virtually square. And then, of course, we went out to the 133 and 137 aspect ratios of Wizard of Oz and Casablanca. We skipped 145, which is Godzilla or Gojira. Japanese print is in 1.45 on the Blu-ray, and went to 166.
There's the image. By the way, that's the image that I was about to ask Josh for, and he found it. Good.
Josh
man.
is a master. I can see that. Yeah. So these are test patterns that I run of each aspect ratio when we're setting something up, and it doesn't matter if it's that sophisticated or simpler. I run test pattern content of the proper aspect ratio to make sure we've got every pixel on the screen, and then I also run content. And sometimes you go back and forth, you find a problem. And I've got reference content where I know this movie is the right James Bond movie in 166 to 1, 240 to 1, the Secret Life of Walter Mitty, for example, and 255 to 1 is, A River of No Return, that first decade of CinemaScope movies, Marilyn Monroe and others. So we played all that. So here you can see, that doesn't look too bad on the screen here. So there's the full width, 255 to 1. We just got the Dunleavys in a spot, and we do have some cross reflection, Don Stewart, but we survived it, and it was in deference to the audio performance, which was also spectacular in this theater.
So is that a curved screen?
No, it's a flat Vistascope screen.
So how can you get cross reflectance then?
Off the side of a gigantic loudspeaker sitting right there.
Okay, I got it. You can barely see it in that picture, but I got you.
But that's it. But if you go probably the page after, I'm not looking at that one right now. You'll see the same images with content where I tested the content.
Well, the next page is test patterns.
Then it would be the prior. No, this is the content. All right, 255 to 1. Rebel Without a Cause.
Yeah. That's the one.
178. I don't remember what I used there. 166 to 1. That's Cinema Paradiso. Yeah.
Okay. I thought that was mostly James Bond movies, earlier James Bond movies.
Oh no, all Europe was 166 to 1. They still do a lot of 166 to 1 in Europe. That was their widescreen. When Hollywood went 185. Europe went 166.
I wonder why.
Yeah. So the 2 point, all the 70 millimeter films. That's the Pacific movie. I
can't remember either.
Oh my goodness, it'll pop into my head. Wizard of Oz 137, 185 is
Many movies are 185 in the U.S.
Yeah, many are 185, but that movie is that was the brilliant movie, a Coen Brothers movie. Come on, Josh, where are you when we need you?
He doesn't know what movies these are.
City Lights 1.2 to 1. So anyway, that's the content of. So
basically, what you're doing here,
Minnesota movie. It's all up in Minnesota. Everybody knows.
Fargo.
Fargo. Yeah, I couldn't think of the town, but I got the state.
Yep.
North Dakota.
It's North Dakota. I was going to say that's not in Minnesota.
I'm giving bad clues.
One thing that this leads me to ask you is, obviously you're doing what's called constant image height. So the height of the image is the same, and that gets back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of you really want to think in terms of image height. And so then you're bringing masking material in and out depending on what the aspect ratio of the particular movie is that you're watching, right?
Right. And when you have the luxury and space to determine the height based on your viewing position so that it is ideal for the range of views that you want. So when you have a one-row theater, you have to be, more interested in personal preference. But when it's a multi-row theater, you want to cover the range of good cinema viewing geometries. So 1.5 to 3 screen heights is what I use as a rule of thumb. If you run out of width, then you get black bars on the top and bottom. So if you've got a screen that's already floor to ceiling and the width is only 185 or 178, you're going to have black bars for your CinemaScope content. And today, Cineplexes do that often. And it's partly because they've run out of space. So they fill the height to kind of emulate, the IMAX charge in their big rooms. But now scope content is smaller image area than flat content, than 185 content. That's not generally what the intention of the director was. They wanted a panoramic view and a more immersive experience. And I have a theory. Nobody's told me for sure, but Interstellar and the Batman movies and so forth that bounce the image from scope to full height and back again. Yes. I think are simply saying I've got to create some drama here, and I can't go wide. My format's already wide, so they fill the heights. And they shot in IMAX or 70 millimeter, as Interstellar was, is one justification for it. But I think it's a sadder day when we can't determine the proper height and let the width grow to whatever format we might want to have. So that to me is always better. The screens are 30, 35 feet high now in the big rooms. And if you go to a scope image in that format, that's where you get your 70 or 80 or 90 foot wide screens. And you have that in the Cinerama Dome in Hollywood and in the Chinese theater in Hollywood. But
you used to. The Chinese theater is now in IMAX.
But it's still 90 feet wide. And it's full masking. So they can still show scope content with a viewing geometry that makes some sense. I think there's 2,000 seats in that theater. So not everybody's going to get a cinema view. But
Right. Another movie that does that aspect ratio switching, I just saw a week or so ago, Doctor Strange, the new Marvel movie. And it only does it in the IMAX theaters. And I think that's true, generally speaking. These movies that change aspect ratio mostly do it only in IMAX theaters. I saw it twice, actually. I saw this movie twice. Once in a Dolby Cinema, so for high dynamic range, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But also in the IMAX 3D, because I really wanted to see the 3D. I don't know if you saw that movie. It's very psychedelic.
I have not seen that yet. But, the Grand Budapest Hotel is a classic example of using aspect ratio to tell the story. They've got 3 different aspect ratios, 2 dominant ones in that movie. The scope format is contemporary. That's the author talking to the old guy to get the story. Then when he goes and tells the story that the old guy told him, he goes to 4:3, 1.33 to 1. And Life of Pi is another one. Ang Lee has 3 aspect ratios in Life of Pi.
I don't think I even noticed
movie.
that.
Well, because they come and they go. It's a 185 movie. But there's a spot when the flying fish come to the boat, and they finally get some food, and the tuna are chasing the flying fish. At the moment, the first fish, he shoves his spear at the tiger. At that moment, it flips to 235. And it stays 235 for that entire scene. And you see the tuna jumping out of the 235 window and swimming through the black bars of the movie. I think he did it as a 3D emphasis, partly.
Wow, is that on the Blu-ray?
And that is on Blu-ray. Oh, absolutely. Yep.
And the 4K Ultra HD
theater
Blu-ray.
and on the Blu-ray.
Okay.
And at
I'll
another
have to go
moment
look at that again.
in that movie, he goes to 4x3, and it's when that that giant whale, I forget the type of whale, swims under the boat.
It's a whale shark. It's a whale shark.
A whale shark, exactly.
It's actually a shark, but it's called
So
a whale
you
shark.
remember the scene, but you don't remember
absolutely.
that a 4x3 image.
Wow, I don't remember that. I have to go back and look. Absolutely.
A friend of mine, Brad Smith, who owns Audio Video Design, said he believed, because that is the cover of the book, that whale shark is the cover of the book, that he sort of gave an homage to the book in that scene by formatting it in 4x3. Who knows?
Wow.
But that's good enough theory for me.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, we've got a lot more to talk about, but let me thank another sponsor for this episode, which is Optical Cables by Corning. Now, Corning can greatly improve your audio-video workflow with their strong, durable, far-reaching Thunderbolt and USB 3.0 fiber optic cables. Whether you're into high-end video, photography, audio production, or computing, Optical Cables by Corning will allow you to build a convenient workspace through a superior long-distance connection. Corning's USB 3.0 and Thunderbolt cables are incredibly strong and flexible. They have exceptional cable runs of up to 60 meters, or 200 feet, for Thunderbolt, and 50 meters, or 165 feet, for USB 3, making it so easy to move noisy, space-consuming devices away from your workspace. You can even bend or walk on Corning cables, and even if they're tangled, it's no problem. They keep transmitting at top speed. Optical Cables by Corning will help you achieve acoustical and electrical isolation so you can enjoy a clutter-free, peaceful work environment. Now, one company that uses Optical Cables by Corning is Universal Audio. They use these optical cables by Corning to achieve acoustic isolation in their studio, where they test new equipment, such as their best-selling Thunderbolt audio interfaces. And I can tell you from my time as a journalist in the professional audio realm that Universal Audio is really one of the best companies out there. So they know what they're doing, and I would trust their approach to this, absolutely. So instead of investing in multiple extenders, adapters, and cables, turn to Optical Cables by Corning to establish the connection you need with one simple long-length cable. Optical Cables by Corning are available at all major electronics and professional AV retailers, including Apple stores, Amazon, B&H, and more. Optical Cables by Corning are longer, thinner, lighter, and stronger. Go to opticalcablesbycorning.com to learn more. And we thank Corning very much for their support of Home Theater Geeks. So we've been talking about aspect ratios and how different movies use different aspect ratios, sometimes within the same movie. And one thing I wanted to touch upon, I want to ask you, John, if you have any experience with this, what are sometimes called really immersive video or movie formats. For example, Barco Escape, which is very interesting. Not only is there a screen right in front of you, but there's also two screens off to the side. So it's almost like super duper Cinerama that was supposed to be kind of enveloping, right? Almost like a virtual reality kind of situation. You mentioned that earlier. And now we have Barco Escape. Have you experienced it? What do you think about it?
Oh, I have not experienced it, and I'm not aware of how many movies have been produced so far. Maze Runner was produced in Escape, and it was exhibited in Escape.
Yep. And the sequel,
I think
Maze Runner Scorch Trial.
Near you.
There is. There are two in
format.
LA, actually. There are two in LA. Maze Runner, The Scorch Trials, the sequel to Maze Runner, was also produced that way, as was the latest Star Trek movie, Star Trek Beyond.
Now, I did not know that. So that will be worth seeking out, because I look at Escape as really the digital cinema implementation of Cinerama. It is the widest immersive horizontal viewing geometry. The vertical viewing geometry is like what we were just discussing. That's a constant. But now you've got the horizontal viewing geometry absolutely taking in all of your peripheral vision and beyond. It approaches that virtual reality notion where you're looking far to your left and you're still seeing what the director created for you to see. That's just another tool in the toolbox for directors to create the emotion and drive the story that they want to drive. So
And we actually have a video. I found a video on the Barco Escape website.
And I'm going to have to find a theater in the northeast quadrant. I get to Southern California regularly. Half of my family is out there. So I will catch it in your neck of the woods. But
hopefully next time you come out.
Yeah, there's another aspect ratio thing that popped up into my head as I was looking at the document, the GHE document. There's a 2.0 to 1 aspect ratio, and that Alan Goodwin gave me a sample of, and it's a Carlos Santana concert video that was shot in Mexico. The first time he went back to his homeland and gave a concert to his people, and it was an emotional experience, you could tell, and it was shot on film in 2.0 to 1.
Now, how did they end up with 2.0 to 1? I mean, is there any film stock that has a native?
That was my question. And I looked it up because there is a director's choice option, which is 2 to 1, which is a Stewart film screen. Tony Gramani and Keith Yates both have had their fingerprints on that product. And the justification for 2 to 1 has been because you can use this sort of aperture masking, infinitely variable mechanism to keep constant image area on the screen, depending on the format. That's not a cinema construct, but it is a light level construct. If you were wanting to have exactly the same light level and couldn't do anything with the projector, constant area means constant light. But I found another cinema justification, let's say an arcane one, and that is a director who did not direct Jurassic World, but he influenced it, proposed a standard aspect ratio for all cinema in the future called Univisium. And Univisium,
I love that word.
I'm not making this up. I wouldn't do that.
All right.
This is Vittorio Sicaro is the director.
Okay.
And Vittorio Storaro. And his concept was something like the compromise between 185 and 178 and 235. Put those all together, mix them up, you come out with 2 to 1. It gives you some geometry, a wide aspect to it without having to jump back and forth between HD, 185, and scope. I think that was the genesis of it. But you can buy Jurassic World today, and you can put it on your screen, and you will find it is an aspect ratio of 2.0 to 1, as is that Carlos Santana movie.
And is that available on...
Yeah, I have a projector over my shoulder that I
saw
set
that
up
Runco projector up there.
That's not the one. That Runco is a classic, scope projector, which is still a reference image. That's the VX22. But the Barco Orion is an electronic widescreen. It's like a 3K projector. They use a big 1600 by 2560 chip, and they create scope at 1080 by 2560, pixel mapped vertically and pixel mapped for 1080 by 1920. However, you can manipulate the geometry, the pixel structure, and do like I do 185 to 1 perfectly, constant height, and 2.20 to 1, and I can do 2.0 to 1 in a memory. So that little projector off to my shoulder underneath,
that's hanging down below that shelf?
Yeah, I am a spaz. I cannot figure this out. Right there.
Yep, got it.
That might not be a politically correct term. I apologize in perpetuity. Yeah, that will do it. And so when I found out Jurassic World was in the format, I immediately got it. I set up the mechanism. I communicated to Barco the settings. And Theo has this in his theater, and he's thrilled with the fact that he can electronically change aspect ratio. And he's got a scope format screen, constant height design, and get it perfect every time. There's no lens variability. There is no secondary lens, so there's a benefit there. And it's just handling aspect ratios effortlessly and instantly is a nice luxury.
Does it do that with zoom and lens shift, or internal masking? How does that work?
None of that. That's the internal masking maybe, but it's not a lens memory zoom shift and focus, which takes time, goes through gyrations.
Isn't exactly precise all the time.
Right. I did it in that GHE theater, but it's a commercial grade projector with, servo lock loop feedback on the lens motor and finding that memory position. It goes directly to the next position. It doesn't have to find zero and start over and all that jazz. So it's precise, and it's been operating without drift over a 1.5 year period. And I don't think I would do it with anything less than that if I weren't going to be there tweaking the projector periodically for the customer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But this does it electronically. So it simply maps 1080 pixels vertically on the screen, and it's natively scope wide, 240:1. And it just brings in the sides for every aspect ratio down to 1.2:1.
In other words, it simply does. It's a constant height projector that basically doesn't use the pixels it doesn't need for that image.
That is correct. And the trick is below 178, that's automatic. It's on the disk. Above 178, it repositions the image to fill the 1080 pixel structure. So there's a vertical process, very minor and only in one direction, that accomplishes the goal. When we use the anamorphic
that is an example of scaling, though, which if it's not done well, can cause problems.
That is correct. And so the trade-off is, when we did the anamorphic lens, that very sophisticated lens that's in the projector above, that's a $15,000 secondary lens. Mm-hmm. The processing was vertical only, right? That's how we got rid of the black bars. And then the width was reformatted optically. So we're doing scaling and optical stretching. In the electronic system, the chip is already formatted at 240. So we're simply doing vertical scaling. And in one direction, which means for everything 178 and below, it's perfectly pixel mapped, vertical and horizontal. And everything wider than 178, there's a graduated vertical scaling that occurs. And I would defy you to see it without a magnifying glass at the screen. I do get up to screens and look at the micro effects, and every process has a trade-off. This one's a real good trade-off.
Elpis in the chat room has identified that there's a Wikipedia entry for Univisium.
Yes.
So absolutely. That's good to check out.
I've been
also
fact-checked.
Yeah, exactly. You're being fact-checked by the chat room is very good at that, believe me. In fact, Eric Duckman came up with a good formula: 2.35 plus 1.78 divided by 2 equals 2.065. So very nearly 2 to 1.
That's a fun fact right there.
Right there. Exactly right. So let's see. Oh,
I got an idea. Josh, can you go to page 1 of the GHE document? Just go right to page 1. There's a couple of things that popped up that I think are interesting. So page 1, on that page is a little bit of what I do, but it also shows 3 theaters, small, medium, and large. And we'll get to that. But the small one is a screen of conventional size. That's only about 11 feet wide or so. So I call that small. And it's a 1-row theater. That's in the upper right-hand corner. To the left is a medium-sized theater. There's a 12-foot 5 by 12 foot scope screen, and that's Phoenix Audio Video. The one in the upper right was Acoustic Blueprint. These are just very good New England dealers, and I gave an award to the Phoenix system, and the award is a bottle of wine. And that bottle of wine.
That's a good award. I like that.
That's a good. Well, this is a special bottle. This is a Coppola bottle, and it's from their Director's Cut category, which is their top shelf category.
Director's Cut wine. I like it.
And the name of the wine is Cinema. So that wine is Director's Cut Cinema, and I give that to every significant theater, and I rank the performance of the theater on a scale of 1 to 100. This theater, I think I gave a 95 or a 96, very high grade theater, because basically it's how close to cinema perfection by cinema standards have you gotten? Viewing geometry, light levels, basic image quality, all the usual, the Joel Silver, Joe Kane parameters for image quality, all of those things. And when they come together, are you masking and handling all the aspect ratios? What technology are you using? Cinema's technology, which is either DLP or SXRD. Those things get you extra points, and that's how I with a little bit of schmaltz, market the idea. And that's the crew of Phoenix Audio Video. Now, below that is a private theater that was done by Maverick Integration, another very good dealer. That's a 16-foot screen, and you can see the perspective of the screen by me standing there, and I'm 6'4", so you can see that's a big screen.
That's a big screen.
And those are those are fabric swatches from the Stewart film screen. In fact, you can see in the diagonal upper right-hand corner all of those image swatches, and that's how I evaluate what's going on the screen. I use a standard Studio Tech 100 reference. I look at the pixel structure. If the screen's acoustically transparent, I can see, without those issues being introduced, exactly what's going on at the pixel level when we're doing our proof of performance or tweaking or what have you. Mm-hmm. And to the right are the when I do training, I trot out the cinema books, and so those are some of the textbooks I use to get people interested in exploring further where these ideas come from. And of course, my reference theater, and it's not my reference, it's just a fun theater, and the Samuel Goldwyn Theater happens to print on their website their seating plan, so I can easily look at dimensions in the theater. I know the size of the screen. I've been in the theater and I've taken pictures, which is against their rules, but somehow I got away with it. And
I won't tell.
Yeah. Oh, believe me, I was told. And
okay.
And I get consumers, end users, real excited about what's going to happen in their theater by relating it to something that they easily understand. The performance of the theater, this is going to be a 92 or a 95. If they understand wine or classic car restored vehicles, they understand a 92 is good and a 95 is better. And then I show where they're sitting, where each row is located on the floor plan of the Academy Theater, and now they know roughly what's going on in terms of the viewing experience. And that's not an easy thing to convey to the average end user who's interested in the art, perhaps, but not the technology. Mm-hmm. They just want to know they're getting something good.
And actually,
that's
we have some illustrations of exactly what you just talked about, which we're going to show in just a second. But before we do, I'd like to thank our third sponsor for this episode, which is CuriosityStream. It's the world's first ad-free nonfiction streaming service. It was founded by John Hendricks, the founder of the Discovery Channel, one of my favorite TV channels. It has over 1,500 titles, 600 hours of content, and over 50 hours of 4K content. It's available in 196 countries worldwide and on many platforms, including a web app, Roku, Android, iOS, Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Amazon Kindle, and Apple TV. It has a wide variety of science and technology content, plus nature, history, and many other topics. In addition to documentaries, they also have interviews and lectures. The library includes some really great stuff, including Stephen Hawking's Favorite Places, a brand new exclusive documentary in which Stephen Hawking pilots a fantastical CGI spaceship across the universe, making stops at Saturn and many of his favorite destinations. There's also Digits, a groundbreaking 3-part series hosted by Derek Muller, creator of YouTube's science channel Veritasium, which explores online safety and security, really important topics. The series features never-before-seen interviews with former NSA contractor Edward Snowden and co-founder of the internet, Vint Cerf. There's also Deep Time History, an exclusive 3-part original documentary series that tells the story of the universe's 14 billion year history, including surprising twists to the stories you thought you knew. And finally, there's also Underwater Wonders of the National Parks. In celebration of the National Park Service's centennial year, this exclusive 7-part series takes you on a journey below the bodies of water within America's national parks. CuriosityStream offers monthly and annual plans, with annual plans offering notable savings. These plans start at just $2.99 per month, less than a cup of coffee or the cost of one title on competing on-demand platforms. So check out curiositystream.com/twit and use the promo code TWIT during sign-up to get unlimited access to the world's top documentaries and nonfiction series completely free for the first 60 days. That's 2 entire months free of one of the largest nonfiction 4K libraries around. Just go to curiositystream.com/twit and use the offer code TWIT at sign-up. And we thank Curiosity Stream very much for their support of Home Theater Geeks. So there's something I wanted to show people here, and that is in the one of the other PDFs that I sent you, Josh, called AB Media Room. And that will show us what exactly you were talking about, John, in terms of overlaying a floor plan onto the Samuel Golden Theater seating plan to see exactly what you're doing with respect to what your ultimate goal is, which is to reproduce the cinema experience as much as possible. I think we can start at page 1, can't we?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. So the backstory, and in retrospect, this is a more complicated way to show the idea. When you've got structured rows in your theater design in the home, you can easily translate that to the seating positions in a commercial theater like the Samuel Goldwyn. This is a living room, a lifestyle room. So I've got a drawing of the location of the furnishings, and this has changed 20 times since we began the project, and an idea for the screen size. And if you go, Josh, back to the top of the page, there's a the little green box has a scale of 1 to 10. And I said I rank theaters on a scale like wine. Well, each, just like I like, wine is a very esoteric and subjective thing to rank. Yeah. I think restored automobiles, like classic 355 Porsches that sell for $3.7 million because it's a 99 instead of a 92. And so somebody made an extra $2 million because they spend a little more detail in classic car evaluation or any Concours d'Elegance. They're looking at components of the car, the exterior, the interior, under the hood, under the carriage. Every little detail is evaluated.
You're doing the same
I'm
thing.
Doing the same thing, and it's a little bit arbitrary. I make a lot of this stuff up, but if it makes sense to people, making it up doesn't matter. And if it relates legitimately. So in a car, the Concours d'Elegance standards that come from the Ferrari Owners Association, they start with 25 points in each of however many, I think 4 categories, right? There's your 100 points. And they subtract from that. So if everything is perfect, it's a 100-point car. Nothing's ever perfect. So, so I start with the screen, and I've got 6 or 8 parameters that a screen is judged by, and almost none of them are talked about in consumer. I go to the projector and I talk about the parameters important in cinema, which is flat field uniformity and white field purity, not just ANSI contrast or sequential contrast, but what they call in digital cinema small area contrast, which is much more difficult, and they're much poorer looking numbers. They don't look impressive on a spec sheet. Right down to adjacent pixel contrast, which you can't measure, but you can observe. And people like Joe Kane have taught us how to on their test discs. And I looked at all those, and I sort of start with, if it's perfect in that area, it's 10. And then I subtract from there. So that's what the scale at the top is. And this particular parameter is the viewing geometry and cinematic scale. And I put the two together because you can get good viewing geometry by sticking your head real close to your laptop screen. But you lack cinematic scale. So I'll never buy that you can get a cinema experience from a flat panel TV, for example. It's just not possible.
Or even worse, a tablet or a smartphone.
Right, or that. Okay, you get an experience, but you're not getting the cinema experience. You're auditing an experience of cinema.
So, very good.
So here we have the smaller screen, and I rank it the viewing geometry and such at an 8. And if you go down a little bit further, I'm hitting my arrows like I'm going to control this, Josh. Stop right there. Right there. Okay. So you see at the bottom, the distance from the screen to the furniture in screen heights.
Yep.
And by the way, this is from right to left. I think I flipped it in these in these diagrams. But you see the closest furniture is about 2 screen heights. And really, there's nothing going on until you hit 3 screen heights. And most of where you're sitting in this room, you're 4, 5 to 7 screen heights away. If you were at the Academy Theater, you right now you're across the street trying to watch that. Right? Now, keep going down, Josh, and we'll get to the next screen option. And that was a 55 by 132 inch screen. And now keep going. Oh, this is the mapping. Stop there. This is mapping that furniture to the floor plan of the Samuel Goldwyn Theater. And so you see the furniture is all in the back of the house there. And
this
some
is
of
in
it
relative terms.
Relative term. Very rough rule of thumb, but conceptually understandable by a normal person, which we are not. So right?
Hey, we're all geeks on this bus for sure.
Right. So go down further. And now you see I've got a higher performance on my scale. I think this is going to be a better result. And if you go further, here's where the furniture is relative to the screen size. I now have a 16-foot wide screen in the design. And look at the viewing distances of the furniture relative to the screen height. The furniture didn't change, the screen did. And now I've got from 1.5 to 3 screen heights, most of the prime comfort seating for watching a movie in that room. It's almost cinema-like. And there's still some furniture at the back of the room. It's good. It's a deep room. This is a grand property. Now, if you go further, you'll see how this mapped to the Academy Theater, and that's where people really tend to get it. Things moved closer to the screen, and you're sitting in prime seats that you might pay extra for at certain events in theaters. And yes, there's some seating down at the lower left that's tucked right up against the screen, but it's really on a sidewall. That's not where you're going to be sitting if you want to watch a movie. That central furniture is in a decent spot to get a cinema-type experience in a space that's just a living room. So now if you go down further, what's below that? Nothing. That's the end.
That's the end.
Yeah. So that's the concept. That's the concept.
Mm-hmm.
I will say also that I rank the audio as part of the system as well. And so how do you draw distinctions between what goes on in real cinema and what goes on in consumer audio and high-end audio, like that Dunleavy Theater in Connecticut? That is a brilliant theater. But at the end of the day, the left, center, and right channels each have one 1-inch dome tweeter. And, the rifles going off in open range in that famous gunfight scene that's got that unbelievable dynamic captured of a gunshot.
In which movie?
To do. Open Range.
The movie's called Open Range. Okay, I don't know that one.
Yeah. Oh, that gunfight scene is. I use that as a test moment for the audio side of a cinema. Doing that without compressing or clipping is a tricky thing. So in my theater, my front stage has got a left, a right, a center, and a left center and a right center, which is the format of most commercial cinemas.
Five speakers in the front behind the screen.
Yeah. And each speaker has a quad array of 1-inch dome tweeters, which is a James loudspeaker innovation where they've created this tetrahedron for their music and cinema reproduction, because you basically get 12 dB more dynamic headroom. And that's the difference between commercial cinema sound and high-end residential audio, is that dynamic headroom. Now, if you can also get an audiophile performance at the same time, and people play with compression drivers and horn systems to get the dynamics, but it's real tricky to also get the audiophile performance. And this is the closest to getting both that I've experienced so far. And, I'm a shill because I sell the product, but they do some legitimate and unique things to extract that performance for the dynamics of music and film content.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask you about the audio side of things. We've been talking only about the video side of things, and I'm sure the audio side of things would certainly easily take another hour to talk about.
You've had some great people on your show. The guy who was a production sound expert, I think he lives in Australia now, gave us some real
Brian Vessa
background on.
Brian McCarty.
That's the name. Yes. Yeah. Very good. What's going on today? And, I've got an Acurus Act 4, which is an immersive audio, Atmos and DTS-X processor. And my room here has a high ceiling elevation. And it's also a angled ceiling. So it's ideal for immersive audio. And I handle Trinoff, which is maybe the most sophisticated in terms of remapping speaker locations and so forth for all these different formats. So hemispherical sound is definitely the thing to play with today. And boy, I've heard demonstrations that were phenomenal. And if we do nothing else, we should get to that extra large format theater. I think I've got some images that show a 48-channel Dolby Atmos theater designed by Dolby. With this dealer, it's a DCI compliant theater to play DCI content and Dolby Atmos, and
that would be in the
unbelievable experience.
That would be in architectural cinema examples. There we go.
Right. So there's the scale, and this is about the same size screen as the Han theater, and if you keep and you are one screen height in that first row back of the theater. And you see comfort seating, and then there's a credenza seating in the back and some further back seating. But
I'm kind of surprised at how light colored those walls are.
That's a Dolby design, and it might be a little lighter in the image than it is in reality, but it's a beige. It's not gray and it's not dark, and it is backlit by LED lighting. So now you're seeing the lighting behind that. It's a transmissive. Sort of semi
super
transparent
cool
material when you backlight it. So you can see the speakers and the acoustical treatment in that theater. Now that image is scope. Now it's a 7.5 foot high as opposed to a 9 foot high image. And your front row, which is 10 feet back, is 1.5 screen heights. So scope content, that theater is transformed into an ideal viewing geometry. And from that point, you can simply go constant height and bring all your images in. You don't have to choose to go to the giant full 9 foot height for 185 content if you don't want to. That's the beauty of that type of a screen and theater.
But you could.
Stupidly expensive, but that's the fun. This is a 360-degree camera shot of that theater with red. And I'm getting involved with LED lighting, a company called Color Beam, because it's a tunable color and white, and I can literally have my calibration partner is Jim Doolittle set up his Minolta CS200 and tune my lighting to 6500 Kelvin precisely.
Wow,
so my
that is
light
so
can
cool.
Be tuned as accurately as the image on the screen. And he's not been up here to do that yet, but he will be. This is our joint lab. This is his lab away from his home lab, you might say.
You mean where you are currently?
Where I am now. This is the unveiling, the debut of what I call York Beach Studios, my new training and party facility for my dealers and my vendors, and I think York Beach Studios is going to be a nice. A fortuitous acronym, because I always say YBS if you can tell the truth, and that will be the acronym for York Beach Studios.
That's amazing. That's really amazing.
It just happens to be where I moved to in the last.
Yeah.
This theater is not even live yet. This is a totally fake theater. It will go live probably in the next week.
Wow! And so we're getting a scoop here on Home Theater Geeks. We get to see it. Get to see it we're among the first people to see it.
You are the first people, other than Jim Doolittle and a few close friends that have seen it in process. Nobody's seen it at this level. I sort of whipped it into shape just as a Skype, laboratory. The last couple of days, getting ready for our show.
I don't know if you're willing to do this, but when we were Skyping earlier, you put up a mirror and you could see some of the rest of the theater. Maybe you're not willing to do that, but if you are, I'd love to see it, because that was actually a pretty cool technique.
I'm totally willing. Let's see if I can figure out how to do it. So, all right. So over to my left, let me get this in a spot. All right. So here's a 21:9 TV. I'm the guy that bought that Vizio 58-inch 21:9 TV.
That one.
Okay. And it's playing content. It's on auto aspect ratio, so it might change. I'm actually playing Mark Cousins' The Story of Film right now. And just my favorite 15-hour movie. And if you want to learn about cinema, all aspects of it, technical and art, the science and the art, Mark Cousins did an unbelievable job on this documentary. It aired on public television. I don't know how many people could stick with it, but I love this kind of stuff. So
is it actually 15 hours long?
Oh yeah, it's 15 hours long. Yeah, it's I think
Wow.
7 discs, 5 or 7 discs.
Wow.
And he
Wow.
covers every world cinema, Hollywood cinema, all the eras. I mean, going back to Georges Méliès and Hugo, you know, that the homage to original cinema.
Yep.
So then if we look up, and there's my my front stage. So those are the speakers that I was talking about. There's my right and my center LCR, you know, left of center, right of center, and my right. So I don't know if you, oh, there, that's a little bit better. Like I say, I'm not good at it. There, you can see the quad tweeter array. I'm picking up some of the floodlights that I have in here. And then the whole screen, my native screen, is a 255-to-1. So it just keeps going. I've got just some manual masking on it right now, but it's a native 255-to-1 screen, and I can get a bigger screen in here when I don't use electronic masking. And that's, as you can see, I maxed out my image width in the space. And I've got viewing geometries that, you know, I'll show you since we're holding things up to the camera. Here is my, when you move to Maine, I think it's a law that you have to go buy guns. So here's my, this is my gun, okay? This is the way I measure viewing geometry directly. So this level gives me the vertical angle, and the laser measuring device on the top gives me my distance, and I measure each row of every theater I do. We do it on paper, but I confirm it in practice. And once I know the vertical viewing geometry, I know the horizontal for every aspect ratio if it's constant height. If it's constant width, I reduce by 1/3 the vertical when you go to scope. So if I've got a 30-degree vertical in scope, I've only got 20-degree vertical. I mean, in flat, I've only got 20-degree vertical in scope on a 178 or 185 screen, which I think is a compromise, but it's a compromise that can be made. Like I showed in the Realm Theater, you can do it in such a way that you can choose to be constant height if the image height is ideal anyway, and then you can go gigantic when you want to just pin people in the back of their seat for the Super Bowl game.
Well, there's so much more to talk about. And we never even got very far into audio. So would you come back and talk more with us in some other time in the future?
Happy to. As things evolve here, I'll have more things to show and tell about. And I think I'll be joining you at some point when Theo is ready to unveil another new concept. That
yes, you and Theo Theo Kalamarakis are working on something really cool. Yeah.
Definitely.
And so you guys will be back for that as well. But I'd sure like to have you come back and talk more about audio, because I've got quite a few things that I like to talk about in terms of audio within a home cinema or personal cinema, as you call it.
Happy to do that. I go back. I don't know if you know, but I was the executive vice president of ADS for almost a decade. And
wow.
Yeah, Dr. Godehard Gunther died just the end of 2015, and he was a Renaissance man. He really did some amazing things, and some of us expatriates got together at his place in Concord, Massachusetts, to celebrate his life. But yes, so from the earliest days of custom installation, okay, I have to say one thing. Architectural cinema is not something I just made up. We coined a phrase. Larry DeWitt and Godehard Gunther coined a phrase in 1976 called architectural audio. When you custom install high performance loudspeakers, it's not new tone anymore. It's something different. It's accurate for music reproduction. And Godehard had Larry DeWitt was the vice president of marketing, was an architect, and Godehard was a musician and literally a rocket scientist, a PhD in nuclear science. And we coined the phrase architectural audio. And I have used that to define what we're doing in cinema as being elevated over regular home theater, as closer to reproducing the art the way the directors and people who work in Hollywood see it when they're creating it.
Well, it's a fascinating subject, and I thank you so much for being here. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And anytime I can be your filler guy when
bless your soul. That's wonderful. That's really good to know. Believe me, because occasionally that happens.
Yep.
That's John Bishop. His website is b-accurate.com.
And there's
So
nothing there, by the way. You can warn.
Oh, there isn't
people.
anything in there. Oh, that's what
Nothing
you
there.
sent
That
me
it's
as
going
your...
to be changing. It's a holding position right now.
Oh, okay, all right. So you don't have any web presence at the moment.
No.
Okay. Well, when you do, we'll be sure to let people know about it. You can always find me at avsforum.com. You can email me at scott@twit.tv. And you can follow me on Twitter at htgeekscott and at avsforum. You can always find previous episodes of Home Theater Geeks right here at twit.tv/htg and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/twit Home Theater Geeks. Next week, we will be taking Thursday off for Thanksgiving. And I certainly hope that you and your loved ones have a wonderful holiday. The week after that, we're going to be pre-recording the show on Monday, November 28th at 5:30 p.m. That's 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And my guest geeks will be a couple of optical scientists from a company called Luminate, which works in the industrial area, but they've come up with a new idea for an ambient light rejecting screen. And I just found out before we started this show that one of those scientists is Dr. Seth Coe-Sullivan, who used to work very deeply in the field of quantum dots. And boy, does he know his stuff when it comes to optical. So I'm really looking forward to talking with him. And I do hope you will join me for that. Until then, geek out.